Well, domestic borders go up as Brisbane locks down again, and Queensland says it will also halve the number of international arrivals currently allowed to quarantine into the state. Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk has requested the drop from 1,300 hotel quarantine arrivals to 650 per fortnight, citing the large number of positive cases of COVID-19 arriving in the state. This move will impact travel plans for some of the 36,000 Australians who are still unable to get home due to the arrival caps. Civil libertarians are saying enough is enough, and they're calling for an overhaul of the international travel bans. Pauline Wright is president of the New South Wales Council for Civil Liberties. Pauline Wright, welcome back to Breakfast.
Thanks very much, Fran.
Queensland health authorities are scrambling to contact trace 7 locally acquired cases of COVID-19, but there are a large number of positive cases flying into Queensland and the other states too, and some of them with the UK variant, which is very, very infectious. In this climate, why would the government overhaul the international travel bans? It's the wrong time, isn't it, for this?
Look, it's been a year now since the imposition of both the inward and outward travel bans. By and large, the Australian quarantine system for people returning to Australia has actually worked really well, although we are seeing this outbreak in Queensland at the moment. But by and large, Australia has managed it extremely well. And I think that if we strengthen the hotel quarantining system, rather than imposing this blanket ban, well, it's not a blanket ban, but it's virtually a blanket ban for ordinary people wanting to travel outside Australia, to go and visit loved ones, to be there for the birth of children, and these sorts of things. It's been very difficult for ordinary people to get permits to travel outside Australia, even for what you and I might think are compelling reasons.
So that's your major concern as a civil libertarian. Your major concern is that citizens aren't allowed to leave their own country.
That's right. I mean, obviously the government, when it imposed this ban on people leaving, had a proper reason for doing so. There was a pandemic that was out of control. Within Australia now, there's very little community transmission of the disease, and to prevent people from leaving just doesn't have that same imperative now.
But isn't that the point, that in Australia there's very little community transmission? That's why the government doesn't want to leave here, have people leave here and go to places where there's high transmission and then want to come home, likely perhaps with an infection. Isn't that the point?
That is the point. But what we can, when you're saying, okay, you ban people from freedom of movement, if you've got a less restrictive way of doing that, then that's what you should be doing. That's what international law says. And in this case, we've got a really effective system of quarantining now. So when we've got Australian citizens wanting to return to Australia, they get tested before they leave. They get quarantined in an effective way when they return to Australia in a hotel for 14 days. And there's been really very little indeed of that transmission when people are coming back.
Yeah, but there is a I understand you're saying, and I understand the frustration of those who can't leave, and I understand that most other countries, I don't think, are imposing restrictions like this on outgoing travel, but there is a major problem. There's already 36,000 Australians. Some of them have been waiting 9 or 12 months even to get home and haven't got home yet because of the travel caps on hotel quarantine. So if more go out and need to come home, that's just going to put more pressure on, isn't it?
Look, I understand that, but what's galling for people is that it seems to be easy for rich or well-connected people to be able to come.
Humanitarian groups are arguing the limits on Australians returning home could breach international law too, and I know the Council is concerned about what's happening there. We have a new Home Affairs Minister been appointed yesterday. In fact, she'll be joining us shortly on the program. What would your message to her be in terms of numbers wanting to come in?
Look, I think what we want is a more open and more transparent process so that we understand the criteria by which decisions are being made either for people exiting or coming home. So that's what I think we need to see, because what's happening now is that we're seeing there seems to be one rule for people who are well connected or wealthy and another rule for ordinary people, and that's that's a perception that is broadly held, and that's something that the government needs to address, I think.
And just finally, I mean, you're making this call now. We are already rolling out the vaccine here in Australia and other countries too, some of them way ahead of us. These challenges, won't they be overcome once enough of us are vaccinated?
Well, you would hope so. And I mean, that is another reason for making the call now. It's a year down the track. Vaccinations are rolling out across the world. So it's time that the government looks at this again and starts to really clarify the decision-making and make it more transparent and less apparently arbitrary.
All right. Pauline Wright, thank you very much for joining us.